Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have one-button bosses, a simple yet challenging experience. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Midnight Munchies, one-button bosses released for the PC via Steam in August of 2024. While not strictly a shoot 'em up per se, this one has a lot of shoot 'em up elements that I definitely feel if you're a fan of the genre, you might like the gameplay here. So the premise is really simple. We have this track around a boss that we follow. We only have one action button, and initially that action button just simply changes our direction. So our goal: dodge the enemy attacks while we fire at them to ultimately defeat them. Pretty simple premise, but it gets challenging quite quickly, and that's quite satisfying. In addition to the base gameplay in a campaign mode, there's also a really neat roguelite mode. But you don't just need to take my word for it. There is a demo available on the developer's itch.io page, so if you like what you see here, check out the demo, and if you like that, definitely pick up this title. So finding ourselves at the main menu, we have the campaign, and you also have the option to jump into roguelite from here. However, we can also access roguelite from campaign. So starting the campaign, this is your campaign screen. So ultimately here, we'll be moving through stages, and you have also a cute story with our little companion here that you see off to the side with the GG hat, Ace, as we fight these, well, bosses in this kind of corporate environment. It's kind of a cute little story. Selecting our first stage. So this one initially, as you get further and further in the game, will unlock the ability to access loadouts, but initially you don't have anything beyond just the ability to turn when you press the button, and your weapon is just a standard shooter. There's also utility here, but that's something that comes on much later. It's actually something I've recently unlocked. So with our basic default loadout, this is the first stage you encounter: Meet Move. So we're fighting HR here, the hint robot. This will basically give you the basics of the gameplay. So we have this track that we're always moving around the boss, but when we press our action button, that swaps our direction. So initially, HR here wants us to change directions multiple times, and then we can get on to a little bit more gameplay. So when the enemy attacks, it'll usually be an indicator of that attack, so we can use our direction changing to dodge that, and that's where a lot of the challenge and the puzzly element of the gameplay comes into play. Now we also have our attack. When we're attacking, it will be automatic, but the way that the attack works is the faster we move, the stronger our attacks get, and also the faster that we'll fire, at least with the default shooter. There are other kinds of weapons that have different mechanics, but the base weapons have about this kind of mechanic. So we want to go as fast as possible while dodging attacks and doing damage to the boss to ultimately defeat them, getting us to this victory screen with our results. Continuing onward, so we have a couple more stages that introduce some basic mechanics, but then we'll find ourselves fighting our first boss, Monday. Selecting Monday, we'll still keep our basic loadout here. So some of the other options you have, you've got some ones that'll change the movement. So instead of when you press the action button, instead of turning, you'll have one that will dash. And that dash, you're temporarily, well, not temporarily, but you're invulnerable when you're in the dash state. There is a cooldown associated with the dash itself, and it's for a few stages, it's actually the appropriate type of movement to use. But for a lot of this gameplay, I do prefer the turn overall. And then there's also another movement type, reverse, where you temporarily pause your movement to reverse around. The weapons themselves, there's our main shooter here, which gets more powerful and fires faster the more we're moving. However, we have a couple other types that we can use as well. There's a laser that basically functions the same way. However, we do need to pick up a laser spark to get it going. Then there's one that's kind of like acts as this boomerang, a juggler, where we have to pick up the boomerangs, throw them at the bosses, and that can actually get really powerful, but it is tricky. And another one is pickup, where with a similar mechanic, we pick up a item to throw at the boss, then we have to go and keep on picking up that item. So Now we've completed this stage, and going back to the main stage here, so we can jump into roguelite mode, which I want to show off because it's actually the way I've enjoyed the game the most. So now we've activated the roguelike mode. So here we can select our weapon once again, as well as our movement. We'll keep things basic as well. Depending on what you pick here, that will really change the experience you have in roguelite, so do keep that in mind. Now we're taken to a roguelike screen, which if you've played a lot of different roguelikes is going to look pretty familiar. As far as we have a branching path, you'll see things like items, shops, elites show up. So if we were to go right, we would encounter an elite. Up and to the left will just be normal encounters. So that's what we'll go with initially. Before we start our... or rather, not before we start a fight. After this fight, we'll encounter, we'll have the option to pick up some power-ups. And before we got to this point, the random enemy types for this section, as well as their attacks, were picked by the game itself. So that one's relatively simple, especially our first fight. Bam! Taken care of. Now we get to pick a discovery. So this is something that we can do to power ourselves up. So here we regain HP for every 999 shots. Speed increase, fairly straightforward, and then we've got the shooting speed increase. So anything that's a DPS upgrade in my mind is always a good choice, so we're going to take this one. And that's the way that the whole roguelite mode progresses. So in this, you're also earning the currency to unlock various elements of the gameplay itself. One of those unlocks, which we can actually activate here, is the color palette. So as we go through and unlock different weapons, movement types, utilities, we're also unlocking color palettes. And there are actually a ton of options here, including some really nice colorblind ones, and then you start to get to their certain special ones that they've set up. And the ones I've encountered that I like the most, I kind of like this butter cake one. So we'll go back to the gameplay now with this new color palette. And the HR, the hit robot here, is telling us it's almost defeated. Bam! So that's our second fight taken care of in the roguelite mode. And that's basically one-button bosses served up for your enjoyment. So we have another set of options here, and there is this rare one, which I think is great. So as far as your shots are concerned, there's 3 levels for the shooter. The light, or rather the small, the medium, and the large bullets. So this one will eliminate the large bullets, but will also never have small. We'll always be firing medium bullets. So sounds beautiful to me, we'll take that. As far as the minus flavors are concerned, really the only one I've got is if you're not a fan of this style of gameplay, where you've got this puzzly dodging shoot 'em up, where that's all you're really doing is dodging the enemy, then you're not really going to go and be a fan of this game. But if you like this kind of gameplay that's on the simple yet challenging side, with somewhat of a minimalistic presentation, then I think this one is definitely going to be one for you. So on the plus flavor, you also have this fun roguelite mode, which is really satisfying to experience and ultimately just try to get better at, get further. There's 5 floors that we're ultimately working through, so a great experience there. The game is also fun yet challenging, even though it's really simple in its mechanics. And it's got a fairly reasonable price point as well. So there you have it. One-button bosses served up for your enjoyment. A recommendation from the chef. Go ahead and check this one out. If nothing else, just its demo on the developer's itch.io page. And that'll bring us to the end of this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining us this week. I hope you have a wonderful week yourself. We're going to go and take a rest, and we hope to go and see you again next time.